February 1943 found seasoned German veterans watching inexperienced American units deploy near Kasserine Pass, convinced discipline and combat sense were fatally lacking. Years of victories against France and Britain had bred confidence, leading Wehrmacht officers to expect another swift collapse. At Kasserine Pass, the Afrika Korps faced fresh American formations, many recently arrived, whose coordination seemed uncertain under desert pressure. German reconnaissance reports mocked sloppy marches and exposed positions, reinforcing assumptions that these opponents lacked hardened leadership entirely experience necessary. Many German officers remembered North Africa against British forces, expecting similar hesitation from Americans during first sustained engagement there initially. The Wehrmacht culture prized battlefield intuition, dismissing textbook training which seemed evident among the newly arrived enemy formations present there. German veterans saw raw American units struggle with terrain and heat, interpreting logistical confusion as moral weakness alone during initial skirmishes there. Such judgments ignored industrial depth and learning capacity, factors that would soon overturn early contempt within weeks there. At Kasserine, German commanders exploited American inexperience tactically, launching counterattacks that confirmed their dismissive expectations. Early assessments there during opening clashes alone. Reports circulated describing prisoners as polite and surprised, reinforcing stereotypes about softness under fire during first encounters there. What Germans failed to grasp was American command flexibility, which allowed rapid correction after painful defeats there quickly under pressure there, alone. Kasserine represented a beginning rather than conclusion, though veterans interpreted it as final proof of American ineptitude then. Veteran Afrika Korps soldiers compared Americans unfavorably with British opponents, overlooking different doctrines and resources entirely initially there during early campaign phases. This comparison shaped attitudes that persisted until Normandy, despite mounting evidence of change within American formations over time. German field diaries from Tunisia recorded surprise at American numbers, yet dismissed quantity without quality initially there alone amid confusion and dust. Industrial scale remained abstract to frontline soldiers, who judged only immediate battlefield behavior during those early desert encounters. Kasserine Pass thus became a lens for misunderstanding, freezing perceptions before adaptation occurred among many Wehrmacht veterans there, under wartime stress conditions. Later campaigns would challenge these beliefs harshly, but early contempt shaped German memory during that North African moment. American commanders themselves acknowledged failures at Kasserine, learning lessons Germans assumed impossible for such forces to absorb rapidly under fire there initially. This disconnect between perception and reality widened briefly, setting stage for dramatic reversal during later campaigns in Europe. German arrogance at Kasserine was not unique, reflecting broader Axis underestimation of American society during early wartime encounters in North Africa then. Soldiers judged individuals rather than systems, missing the momentum building behind the lines across oceans and factories there. Thus, Kasserine Pass stands as opening chapter, where German veterans dismissed Americans too soon under fog of war, amid dust-noise confusion. The judgment born there would unravel across beaches, forests, and frozen fields during subsequent Allied campaigns worldwide later. German contempt toward American troops emerged from pre-war ideology, shaped by propaganda portraying the United States as decadent, industrialized, and spiritually weak. Wehrmacht education emphasized racial hierarchy and combat tradition, encouraging officers to believe material wealth produced comfort rather than battlefield resilience. Early encounters reinforced bias, because inexperienced American units initially confirmed German expectations through visible mistakes under pressure. Hesitation, poor coordination, and reliance on manuals appeared to validate claims that Americans lacked instinctive soldierly qualities valued by veterans. German military culture glorified long service, hardship, and obedience, viewing citizen soldiers with suspicion and disdain. The American system of rapid mobilization seemed incompatible with German notions of professionalism, leading to assumptions that training shortcuts produced inferior fighters. Many Wehrmacht veterans compared Americans to French forces defeated in 1940, assuming similar collapse once tested seriously. This flawed analogy ignored differences in leadership adaptation, logistical depth, and willingness to absorb losses while reorganizing rapidly. German intelligence assessments before direct contact relied heavily on stereotypes and limited observation. Reports emphasized American wealth and civilian habits, reinforcing beliefs that democratic societies could not sustain prolonged brutal warfare against hardened authoritarian states. Captured American soldiers early in the war appeared polite and compliant, confirming German expectations of softness. Such encounters overlooked shock, exhaustion, and inexperience, misinterpreting humane behavior as weakness rather than discipline or confidence. The Wehrmacht underestimated American non-commissioned officers, whose decentralized authority contrasted sharply with rigid German hierarchies. This flexibility seemed chaotic to observers, masking the resilience and initiative that would later dominate small unit engagements. German commanders also dismissed American marksmanship and fieldcraft, mistaking initial errors for permanent deficiencies. They failed to recognize accelerated learning curves driven by systematic after-action reviews and institutional willingness to discard failed practices. Racial arrogance further distorted German judgment, as Nazi ideology ranked Anglo-Americans below supposed Aryan exemplars. This contradiction allowed Germans to rationalize setbacks without reassessing underlying assumptions about enemy capability and determination. Logistical abundance was mocked as evidence of softness, with German soldiers deriding American supplies and comforts. They overlooked how reliable food, ammunition, and medical care sustained morale and combat endurance under prolonged operational strain. Combat reports selectively emphasized German successes, reinforcing confirmation bias within units already convinced of superiority. Failures were attributed to bad luck or numbers, not enemy skill, delaying recognition of American tactical improvement. This early contempt became dangerous self-deception, blinding German forces to a rapidly evolving opponent. By the time respect replaced ridicule, strategic momentum had shifted irreversibly against a Wehrmacht trapped by its own assumptions. German commanders began noticing change after Kasserine, as American units returned to battle reorganized and sharper. Tactical errors diminished quickly, replaced by coordinated artillery, armor, and infantry movement, signaling a learning process far faster than Wehrmacht doctrine had expected. The speed of American adaptation unsettled German officers, who were accustomed to enemies repeating mistakes. After action reviews, leadership changes, and aggressive training cycles produced measurable improvements within weeks, undermining assumptions that democratic armies required years to mature. In Tunisia and Sicily, Germans encountered American fire discipline improving noticeably. Artillery concentrations became precise and devastating, supported by reliable communications, demonstrating a technical competence that contradicted earlier caricatures of undisciplined amateurs reliant on sheer numbers alone. German field reports increasingly referenced American initiative at junior levels, an alarming development. Platoon leaders maneuvered independently, exploiting opportunities without awaiting orders, revealing a command culture emphasizing flexibility rather than rigid obedience under chaotic battlefield conditions. Armored engagements further challenged German confidence, as American tank crews learned combined arms coordination. Infantry support, air liaison, and logistics integrated smoothly, creating pressure points Germans struggled to counter without sufficient reserves or fuel. Air power magnified the shock, because American tactical aviation responded rapidly to frontline requests. German units found movement increasingly dangerous by daylight, as fighter bombers disrupted supply lines and morale with relentless presence overhead. American willingness to rotate commanders after failures impressed reluctant German observers. Removing ineffective leaders signaled institutional pragmatism, contrasting sharply with Wehrmacht reluctance to question authority despite mounting evidence of strategic decline. Captured German officers admitted surprise at American morale, noting persistence after losses rather than collapse. Units regrouped, attacked again, and adapted tactics, demonstrating psychological resilience Germans had not anticipated from supposedly comfort-oriented soldiers. Logistical superiority compounded the effect, allowing Americans to replace losses rapidly and sustain pressure. German commanders recognized that even successful defenses drained resources irreversibly, while American strength appeared endlessly renewable across the front. By late 1943, German assessments quietly shifted tone, acknowledging American competence in internal memoranda. Public bravado persisted, yet private correspondence revealed concern about facing an enemy who learned faster than expected. Normandy would later confirm these lessons brutally, but the shock began earlier. American adaptation eroded the foundation of German contempt, replacing certainty with unease and forcing commanders to reconsider long-held assumptions. Learning the hard way, German officers realized too late that adaptability itself was a weapon. Against an enemy capable of rapid institutional change, battlefield experience became an accelerating advantage rather than a temporary setback. On June 6, 1944, Heinrich Severloh manned his machine gun overlooking Omaha Beach, believing earlier assumptions about Americans would finally be confirmed as waves of landing craft approached under fire, smoke, and confusion, presenting targets that seemed doomed by German defensive preparation. From his position, Severloh saw American infantry cut down in the surf, reinforcing long-held contempt initially. Yet something unexpected emerged as men kept advancing despite losses, crawling forward, reorganizing under fire, and refusing to retreat even while casualties mounted relentlessly. German doctrine predicted collapse after such punishment, but Severloh watched Americans adapt minute by minute, using terrain, smoke, and leadership to push inland, demonstrating resilience that contradicted every stereotype he had absorbed during earlier campaigns and ideological training within the Wehrmacht worldview. Hours passed with no decisive victory, only relentless American pressure, and German defenders felt something shift psychologically. As enemy soldiers continued climbing bluffs under artillery and machine gun fire, revealing determination that experience alone could not easily extinguish during that brutal morning. Severloh later recalled firing thousands of rounds, yet sensing futility growing because Americans kept coming despite staggering losses, forcing defenders to confront an enemy motivated by discipline, comradeship, and mission rather than fear or coercion alone under relentless battlefield conditions there. By afternoon, German positions fractured, not from lack of firepower, but from American breakthroughs achieved by initiative and sacrifice, shocking defenders who had expected easy victory and forcing reconsideration of assumptions formed in Africa and reinforced by propaganda within German ranks. Omaha Beach represented more than a battle. It became a revelation, where German soldiers saw Americans endure chaos without disintegrating, adapt under fire, and achieve objectives through persistence, undermining myths carefully cultivated about Western weakness within the Wehrmacht psyche then. For Severloh personally, the day lingered painfully, as memories of fallen attackers conflicted with indoctrination, planting seeds of respect and remorse that would surface decades later when former enemies met not as soldiers, but as aging men reflecting on survival. German command evaluations after D-Day acknowledged unexpected American effectiveness, citing rapid exploitation of breaches and relentless reinforcement, signaling that previous underestimation had been costly, and that the enemy possessed both courage and organizational depth on the battlefield there then. Among defenders, whispers spread that Americans fought differently than expected, combining aggression with coordination, forcing German veterans to accept that Omaha was not a fluke, but evidence of a transformed opponent arriving in overwhelming strength from across the Atlantic world. Severloh survived, carrying psychological scars shaped by that day, understanding that the men he fired upon were neither weak nor inferior, but soldiers driven forward by belief in purpose, leadership, and each other under unimaginable stress during the invasion itself. Omaha Beach thus shattered illusions permanently, marking the moment many Germans realized American soldiers had become formidable adversaries, capable of absorbing punishment and continuing forward, a realization that would echo through subsequent battles across Europe with profound consequence afterward universally. German observers underestimated American industry, assuming quantity sacrificed quality, yet assembly lines delivered tanks, aircraft, ships endlessly across vast continents. They misread civilian mobilization, where factories converted overnight, producing standardized weapons faster than European workshops ever managed during total war. American production stunned German planners because losses vanished through replacement, rendering tactical victories strategically meaningless across prolonged continental campaigns worldwide. Railroads, ports, pipelines synchronized supply, ensuring fuel, ammunition, food arrived relentlessly, sustaining offensive momentum without pause, despite enemy interdiction efforts. German soldiers noticed American units re-equipped constantly, damaged vehicles replaced quickly, eroding confidence gained through attrition during extended operations everywhere. Unlike Germany constrained by scarcity, America flooded fronts with abundance, transforming endurance into an industrial contest decided by capacity alone. Shipyards launched Liberty vessels weekly, enabling sustained invasions, something German strategists could neither match nor disrupt, despite submarine campaigns intensifying. Airframes, engines, munitions poured forth, Standardization simplified repairs, training logistics, magnifying combat effectiveness everywhere. Across diverse theaters, climates, fronts simultaneously. German intelligence reports acknowledged numbers overwhelming yet clung to hope American morale would crack, under sustained pressure, losses, shortages eventually. They misunderstood production as morale, where certainty of replacement emboldened risk-taking among commanders, soldiers, crews, pilots, mechanics, planners alike. American industry enabled learning cycles, mistakes corrected with new equipment, doctrine updated continuously through feedback training exercises, combat analysis loops. Germany lacked comparable flexibility, upgrades lagged, shortages mounted, innovation throttled by bombing. Resource constraints, bureaucratic delays exhausted labor morale capacity. Frontline Germans equated American wealth with softness, until confronted by endless materiel, supporting infantry, armor, artillery, aviation, engineering, medicine, communications. Abundance allowed redundancy, casualties replaced, equipment swapped, tempo sustained. Across assaults, defenses, pursuits, withdrawals, night-day weather, seasons, theaters, months. German factories could not compete, dispersed production struggled against bombing. Labor shortages worsened amid raw material deficits, transport failures, sabotage. American plants expanded output, protected by oceans, energized by labor participation, including women, minorities, migrants, mobilized nationwide rapidly, efficiently, decisively. German commanders learned industry equaled strategy, where factories dictated possibilities more than tactics, on shifting fronts, continents, oceans, timelines globally. This realization bred fatalism. Victories felt temporary, defeats irreversible, when replacement flows favored opponents relentlessly, predictably, continuously, mechanically, inexorably, decisively. American production underwrote coalition warfare, equipping allies, synchronizing operations, sustaining momentum across combined commands, multinational forces, complex campaigns simultaneously worldwide. Germany faced many enemies, yet one factory nation dominated outcomes. Through scale, speed, reliability, adaptability, coordination, logistics, finance, science, engineering. Soldiers sensed inevitability. Ammunition never ran dry for Americans. During assaults, defenses, pursuits, pauses, resupply, transitions, setbacks, winters, summers, deserts. German units rationed shells, fuel, spares, calculating survival carefully. Amid uncertainty, shortages, delays, breakdowns, improvisation, fatigue, stress, attrition, isolation, retreat. Industrial war decided perceptions. Germans recognized Americans as inexhaustible opponents, whose factories ensured pressure, continuity, escalation, dominance, endurance, superiority. Ultimately, respect replaced dismissal, shaped by steel tonnage rather than rhetoric. Observed, delivered, sustained, measured across campaigns, years, battles, losses, victories. After D-Day, German units faced constant American attacks, leaving little time to regroup or restore shattered defensive coherence and operational confidence. What surprised veterans was persistence. Americans pressed forward after setbacks, exploiting gaps with coordination, firepower, and overwhelming numbers across Norman countryside relentlessly. German commanders noted American tempo increased daily. Attacks followed, artillery barrages, airstrikes, armor thrusts, without predictable pauses during prolonged Norman fighting. Such pressure exhausted defenders psychologically. Units could not recover losses before new assaults arrived from multiple directions under continuous Allied surveillance conditions. American infantry demonstrated growing tactical skill, using hedgerows for cover, flanking positions, coordinating closely with armor, artillery support, radios, leadership initiative aggressively. German veterans admitted grudging respect. These soldiers learned rapidly and exploited every lesson at high operational speed across successive engagements daily, relentlessly. American replacement systems impressed defenders. Depleted units reappeared reinforced while German formations dwindled steadily under constant bombardment, supply shortages, fatigue, stress, attrition. This imbalance shaped respect. Courage mattered less than sustainability in prolonged modern warfare against industrial adversaries. Fielding endless reserves, material, manpower, coordination. German soldiers observed Americans treating wounded comrades quickly. Medical evacuation reduced fear and sustained morale during intense combat situations, repeatedly witnessed firsthand. Such care contrasted sharply with German shortages, reinforcing belief Americans valued soldiers as renewable yet protected resources within expansive logistical medical systems. American artillery dominance forced Germans underground. Sustained barrages disrupted communication, command, cohesion, movement. Resupply, morale, coordination, initiative, planning, execution, endurance, stability, effectiveness. Veterans acknowledged professionalism. Fires were responsive, accurate, devastating beyond early expectations, shaped by training. Coordination, observation, technology, logistics, experience, adaptation, discipline, skill. Night attacks failed increasingly. Americans improved perimeter defense, patrolling listening posts. Counterattacks, coordination, illumination, communications, artillery, reaction drills, leadership, cohesion, confidence, resilience. German infiltration tactics lost effectiveness. Surprise diminished against alert, adaptable opponents, supported by intelligence, air, reconnaissance, radar signals, coordination, integration, training, doctrine. American logistics flowed uninterrupted. Fuel, ammunition, food sustained tempo even during heavy fighting amid contested roads, bombardment, weather congestion, enemy fire disruption. German supply columns collapsed. Allied air interdiction magnified shortages daily across Norman routes, depots, railways, bridges, junctions, schedules, morale, endurance, effectiveness, capacity. American command coordination impressed observers. Joint operations synchronized land, air, naval fires seamlessly through planning, communication, rehearsals. Adaptability, initiative, authority, delegation, trust. German rigidity suffered. Orders lagged reality amid fluid battles constrained by hierarchy, communication. Damage, losses, confusion, fear, exhaustion, attrition, uncertainty, isolation, paralysis. American soldiers rotated units rest, maintaining effectiveness over months through organized schedules, medical care replacements, relief, discipline, planning, command, logistics systems, policies. German formations fought continuously. Exhaustion eroded combat power irreversibly amid shortages, casualties, stress, hunger, bombardment. Retreat, pressure, isolation, attrition, despair. Collapse, defeat. Respect replaced contempt gradually. Americans proved relentless, adaptable, determined under fire, adversity, pressure, learning. Coordination, resilience, endurance, leadership, morale, logistics, industry, numbers. German veterans spoke quietly, acknowledging underestimated enemy capacity, shaped by democracy, industry, training, flexibility, coalition scale, logistics, morale, adaptation, innovation, persistence, resolve. Normandy taught Germans reality. American power combined human resilience with industrial might across sustained operations. Campaigns, fronts, months, pressure, attrition, escalation, dominance. That lesson carried forward, reshaping perceptions until war's end among survivors, veterans, commanders, prisoners, historians, witnesses, memories, reflections, reckoning, reconciliation, understanding, acceptance. December 1944 opened with German hope, believing surprise and winter would finally shatter American morale in the Ardennes forests. Veterans expected inexperienced units to flee under pressure, yet early encounters revealed stubborn resistance. Roadblocks held, and units fought surrounded, delaying timetables critically. German assault troops noted Americans withdrawing methodically rather than collapsing, trading space for time while inflicting losses. Villages became strongpoints, crossroads defended fiercely, and supply dumps destroyed deliberately. Demonstrating discipline and planning Germans had not anticipated during a supposedly decisive offensive. At Bastogne, German officers demanded surrender, convinced isolation would break defenders, yet Americans replied with defiance. This refusal spread rapidly through German ranks, signaling an enemy prepared to endure hunger, cold, and bombardment rather than yield strategically vital ground. German infantry attacking Bastogne faced coordinated artillery fires despite encirclement, astonished that Americans maintained command cohesion. Radio networks functioned, ammunition rationed intelligently, and morale held firm, undermining psychological warfare Germans relied upon during earlier campaigns. Weather grounded Allied aircraft briefly, giving Germans hope, but American units still resisted aggressively on the ground. Patrols counterattacked nightly, denying rest, eroding momentum, and forcing German formations to expend precious fuel and strength under freezing conditions. When skies cleared, American air power returned instantly, crushing German columns. Soldiers realized surprise had failed because Americans absorbed the blow and responded decisively, integrating air-ground operations faster than German planners had believed possible under winter chaos. German veterans remarked on American junior leadership, sergeants and lieutenants holding lines independently when communications failed. Such autonomy prevented collapse, contrasting with German units paralyzed awaiting orders amid disrupted command structures and constant Allied pressure. American logistics astonished attackers as supplies reached front lines despite snow and enemy action. Fuel, ammunition, food appeared where Germans assumed none could arrive, reinforcing belief that American systems functioned even under extreme operational stress. Prisoners taken during the Bulge showed determination rather than despair, speaking confidently of relief forces advancing. This attitude unsettled German troops, accustomed to broken enemies, revealing psychological resilience shaped by faith and overwhelming support. German commanders recognized the offensive failing, not through lack of bravery, but because Americans refused to break. Each delay multiplied Allied strength. While German resources dwindled irreversibly under attrition, air attack, and logistical collapse. By January 1945, German soldiers admitted the truth quietly. Americans had become unbreakable opponents. The Bulge destroyed remaining illusions, proving that even surprise and desperation could not overcome American endurance and adaptive combat power. The Ardennes marked final respect. Americans were no longer dismissed but feared as relentless adversaries. German veterans carried this lesson into captivity, acknowledging that the enemy they once scorned had ultimately mastered modern war. Captured German soldiers often expected harsh treatment, influenced by propaganda and Eastern Front experience. Yet American guards behaved calmly and professionally consistently. Food, medical care, and clear rules surprised prisoners, undermining fears and beginning reassessment of American character during captivity across many camps' experiences. Many Germans noted Americans followed Geneva Convention standards, registering prisoners promptly and separating wounded for immediate treatment with consistent oversight procedures applied. This contrasted sharply with expectations formed by Nazi briefings, forcing cognitive dissonance among captured soldiers during early confinement periods repeatedly observed there. American interrogations focused on information, not humiliation, conducted by trained personnel who maintained distance and respect throughout questioning sessions, consistently recorded by prisoners. Germans admitted relief at absence of violence, a stark difference from feared reprisals during capture aftermaths across multiple fronts encounters remembered later. Meals appeared generous compared to front rations. Reinforcing belief, Americans valued compliance through humanity rather than terror within detention compounds observed widely. Cigarettes, coffee, and conversation reduced hostility, enabling prisoners to reassess enemies as fellow soldiers during guarded interactions over time repeatedly reported afterward. Medical treatment impressed deeply. Wounded Germans received care alongside Americans without discrimination or delay under field hospitals. Procedures consistently applied across theaters. Such experiences challenged propaganda claims, reshaping opinions about enemy morality among survivors, reflecting later in interviews, memoirs, testimonies, letter statements, discussions, accounts. American guards enforced discipline firmly yet fairly, preventing abuse and maintaining order without brutality across camps' compounds holding thousands of prisoners daily. Germans contrasted this with Eastern Front captivity stories, reconsidering assumptions taught since youth through schooling propaganda. Indoctrination years earlier persistently reinforced their work details offered structure and purpose. Prisoners labored under supervision with adequate rest and rations provided regularly according to regulations observed consistently. Such routines reduced despair, fostering grudging respect for American administration within confinement environments across long months, years, internment experiences endured collectively then. Correspondence with families was permitted, easing anxiety and reinforcing perception of lawful treatment under monitored channels according to international conventions applied consistently. German prisoners noted transparency. Rules explained clearly upon arrival within camps, compounds, processing centers across regions, front lines, transfers, movements, stages, phases, periods. Rumors of mistreatment faded, replaced by stories of fairness spreading through camps as experiences accumulated. Daily interactions repeated consistently across populations widely. This shift affected morale. Prisoners complied, cooperated, and waited for war's end with patience, discipline, resignation, acceptance, realism shaped by treatment received. Post-war interviews revealed lasting impressions. Americans remembered as firm but humane captors by former prisoners, reflecting decades later, publicly, privately, repeatedly, consistently. These memories contrasted sharply with combat brutality, separating battlefield killing from captivity ethics in veteran narratives, discussions, writings, lectures, meetings, reconciliations, dialogues. American policy aimed legitimacy. Understanding treatment influenced surrender rates and intelligence flow among enemy formations, units, commands, decisions. Morale calculations, assessments, outcomes. Germans recognized pragmatism, humanity serving strategic ends within broader warfare frameworks. Calculations, doctrines, planning, priorities, incentives. Pressure's realities contexts understood gradually later. By war's end, respect extended beyond combat, shaped by captivity experiences, endured, remembered, shared, compared, analyzed across survivor groups, communities, narratives, histories. German veterans admitted Americans fought hard yet treated prisoners decently, reshaping enemy images permanently within personal memories, cultural discourse, reconciliation processes, efforts. In Allied captivity, German prisoners spoke freely. Unaware microphones recorded conversations for intelligence analysis purposes secretly. These recordings later revealed candid opinions, stripped of propaganda, offering rare insight into what soldiers truly thought about American enemies during unguarded moments together. Many conversations expressed surprise at American effectiveness, admitting earlier contempt was misplaced entirely after sustained combat experiences. Soldiers discussed being overwhelmed by coordination, artillery, air power, logistics, numbers, resilience, adaptability, professionalism. Discipline, persistence, endurance, morale, cohesion, leadership. Prisoners compared Americans favorably against other opponents, noting fairness, competence, and calm professionalism under fire. They remarked Americans fought methodically rather than emotionally, applying pressure relentlessly without cruelty, a contrast to ideological expectations ingrained since training. Some recordings captured admiration for American courage, particularly under heavy fire during Normandy assaults and Ardennes fighting. Germans acknowledged enemy soldiers advanced despite casualties, maintaining formation, cohesion, leadership, initiative, despite chaos, noise, confusion, fear, stress, exhaustion, loss, attrition. Industrial might featured prominently. Prisoners marveled at endless equipment replacing losses effortlessly across fronts, theaters, months, campaigns. They recognized strategic inevitability, acknowledging that no tactical brilliance could offset such material superiority, combined with learning capacity, adaptation speed, coordination scale. Several prisoners admitted fear of American artillery and air power, describing bombardments as psychologically crushing experiences endured daily. Comments reflected helplessness, where defenses eroded under sustained firepower, undermining morale, discipline, command, cohesion, stability, endurance, resilience, effectiveness, survival chances. Discussions revealed respect for American medical evacuation systems, prisoners noting wounded returned to fight or survived injuries quickly. This contrasted sharply with German shortages, reinforcing belief Americans valued soldier welfare as force multiplier rather than expendable resource during campaigns. Some conversations showed grudging admiration for American junior leadership, sergeants taking initiative independently without waiting orders. Germans contrasted this with rigid hierarchies, admitting flexibility allowed Americans to exploit fleeting opportunities during fluid engagements effectively, consistently. Recordings captured bitterness toward German leadership, blaming strategic miscalculations rather than enemy superiority alone. Prisoners acknowledged underestimating Americans early, admitting arrogance clouded judgment and delayed adaptation with fatal consequences across campaigns, theaters, fronts. Importantly, these voices lacked performative bravado, reflecting private honesty among peers. Men spoke candidly of fear, respect, admiration, frustration, resignation, acceptance, inevitability, exhaustion, disillusionment, realism, survival, coping, memory, trauma, reflection, understanding. Historian Sienk Neitzel later analyzed recordings, revealing consistency across accounts from different units, fronts, periods. Patterns showed evolving perceptions, from contempt to respect, shaped by experience rather than ideology, propaganda, myth, rhetoric, assumption, prejudice, ignorance, indoctrination, denial. These secret voices humanize history, exposing soldiers grappling with reality, contradicting belief systems. They demonstrate how sustained contact dismantles myths, replacing caricatures with complex assessments grounded in lived combat experience, memory, reflection, understanding, acceptance. Through whispered conversations, history preserved truth. Germans recognized Americans as formidable professional soldiers. The recordings stand as testament, revealing respect forged not by speeches, but by survival amid modern industrial war brutality. Decades after the war, former German and American soldiers reflected on shared experiences, realizing the men they once faced across battlefields were more human than enemy propaganda had suggested. Memories of fear, courage, and survival reshaped perceptions long after combat ended. Heinrich Severloh and American veteran David Silva exemplified reconciliation, meeting 60 years after Omaha Beach, exchanging stories, and acknowledging mutual endurance. Their encounter symbolized the transformation of enemies into men bound by history rather than ideology. Veterans recounted the chaos, noise, and carnage of battle, admitting personal bravery and mistakes while understanding that soldiers on both sides were driven by duty, orders, and survival instincts under unimaginable stress. Family members and historians witnessed these meetings, where acknowledgement of shared suffering replaced lingering resentment, creating dialogues that humanized opponents, fostering understanding about the costs of war and the nature of courage. Reconciliation extended beyond individuals. Memorial ceremonies, museums, and documentaries highlighted mutual respect, emphasizing valor and sacrifice without glorifying one side or demonizing the other, showing that recognition could bridge decades of division. German veterans admitted that American professionalism, endurance, and ethical conduct toward prisoners fundamentally challenged earlier assumptions about weakness, prompting deep reflection and acknowledgement of error in preconceptions formed under propaganda and battlefield stress. American soldiers reflected similarly, recognizing that their former enemies exhibited loyalty, bravery, and skill under fire, traits that forced respect even while witnessing acts of aggression that threatened their own lives daily. Historians documented oral histories, letters, and interviews, preserving nuanced understanding of combat, moral dilemmas, and personal transformations that occurred during and after conflict, providing context beyond strategic and operational narratives for future generations. These post-war encounters highlighted the possibility of closure, as men who once fired upon each other reconciled through shared recognition of humanity, suffering, and the randomness of survival in industrialized warfare. Memories of Omaha, Kasserine, the Bulge, and other campaigns became tools for education, emphasizing the ethical dimension of war, the resilience of individuals, and the need to understand opponents as humans rather than abstract threats. Reconciliation also influenced cultural memory, shaping films, literature, and scholarly works, where American and German perspectives converged, allowing audiences to appreciate the complexity of soldiers' experiences, moral decisions, and the psychological consequences of combat over years of fighting. Ultimately, the legacy of respect and memory transformed former enemies into men capable of empathy, dialogue, and reflection, demonstrating that even after total conflict, understanding, reconciliation, and acknowledgement of shared humanity remain possible across decades and continents.